Hey folks, this is Tath, and with me today we have the wonderful Zay. Say hey.
Heyo.
And of course we can't forget Jaedaen.
Hello, Tath. Zay, how's it going?
Good.
Pretty good. It's kind of chilly outside, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, so we've talked about doing this, and when we initially brought up the idea, I could veritably hear through my microphone and see just picture Jaden's eyes glowing brightly going, ooh, when I mentioned maybe we should do something called the IndyCast. So I think this is going to morph over time, but for today, what we've kind of talked about doing, and we've taken down some notes. We'll see how much we go through and what we decide to do. But we kind of each put a handful of games together that we've played in the last year that we'd like to talk about. We also have a special section which I've called the mixed bad. We'll see what we truly call it, because I don't think the two things I threw on there I don't think are truly bad games, but I kibitzes about. So we'll see where we get to it. But I figured for this format, maybe what we'll do is we'll go like kind of do a round table thing. I figured we'll start with Jaedaen if you wanted to pick something and we can kind of talk about it. We'll see where the discussion goes. These don't have to be super long. Maybe we'll have a couple of rapid fire. We'll see.
Well, that sounds great. I guess I'll go here. Basically, I want to start off with a game that we all played together that I think really deserves quite a good mention. It's this very solid game, excellent soundtrack, and very atmospheric. It's Raft, and for those who don't know, Raft is essentially a crafter. You are on a raft in the middle of an ocean. All of your crafting materials are floating towards you, and you collect them manually at first. Eventually, you automate, as in many of these types of games, and you find these islands. And sometimes they're just for gathering resources, but for other times, they're story-based islands that you end up going to, to advance the story, which it's not a bad story. I wouldn't say it's an amazing story, but it's nice that it's there, and definitely some interesting moments. And what I love about this game personally, on an emotional level, is it'll just be totally silent. You hear the waves, and it's this feeling of isolation. And then one of the tracks will come forward, and really just paint this mood. The sun will be rising, and it'll be this uplifting music that just sort of carries you into the experience. And I like those little small moments in games that really do something like that. That's not really tangible, but kind of more sits in the back of the mind in terms of how it makes you feel in the moment. And I know we played a lot of Raft. What do you guys think about it? What thoughts do you have in regards to the
I
game?
have one good and one bad that I think are worth mentioning. And
Sure.
the bad is, I'll start with first because it's not Raft exclusive. This is a pet peeve I have about the survival horror genre. Well, not horror, but survival games in general, is that they always make their thirst or hunger type meters way too aggressive. So you spend so much time on that instead of exploring the other cool parts of the game. I think I loved this game universally, other than that system. That I didn't like. Uh Specific to Raft, the one minor thing is some of the late game resources I feel like come in way too late when the story's trying to wrapping up, but that's minor. Uh on, and I had a good, and I can't remember what it is. It flew from my brain. So I'll give Zay a chance while I try to remember
Sure.
what the good was.
Well, I do love this game. My bad is not necessarily a bad from the game, but a bad of us who we started a game and we have not finished it.
Well, technically, you and I played our own game first, and then we tried to
Yes.
show Jaedaen at post story update, because as you said, Jaedaen, that added a lot of extra panache to the game. It was worth
It did.
exploring.
So that is my bad of the game. I've always, even when we first started playing it before all the changes that added more story element, I really loved the game because I do love base building games. One of the things I really loved about Raft is that, especially when you are playing with other people, that's where I think the game really shines because of the fact that you can actually choose what each person concentrates on. You have somebody that can go ahead and go okay, I'm going to go ahead and concentrate on doing the upgrades on the raft and being able to go out on the islands and being able to get those items to be able to do those upgrades and talking to the vendor to be able to upgrade the different things that you can get from the vendor to be able to go upgrade the raft. You can actually have another person concentrating on doing the farming and dealing with the animals that you may catch and you have in an enclosed area on your raft. You can have somebody going out there hunting and swimming and getting resources from underneath the water. Or my favorite, killing Brucey.
aka the shark. I don't know why he became named Brucey, but
I think it's a thing in the game that I do remember somewhere in the game, one of the first places that you stop, if I remember correctly, it does say something about Bruce.
oh, that's probably true. I forgot that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
met a shark, named him Bruce.
There you go.
Exactly.
I think is what it says. But yeah. So yeah, we just been calling him that ever since. Annoying the shark is
I remember
because
go for it. Sorry.
yeah, annoying the shark was. I'm speaking like Yoda apparently, because it just never stopped, and that was an annoying part of the game. Yeah, I like the shark. It gives you meat that you can harvest that is helpful and not difficult to kill really. There's a system to it that you have to get used to, but it's just incessant. It never stops, and the same way that Tath talked about how he would have liked the hunger and the thirst meters to be a little less aggressive. I would have liked Bruce to be a little less present.
Yeah.
Longer cooldown after you killed him before he respawned.
Agreed.
Right.
I think this game it's amazing as an indie game, but if they put some time to actually adding quote unquote accessibility features, so like you could just dial up, like if you wanted him to respawn instantaneously, you could do that, but also on the same thing, like I want him to take 5 minutes off or 10 minutes off. Like I'd love if they do that, plus have like modifiers for the hunger and thirst. I think that would make it, that'd be like the chef's kiss on this, because I find this game to be a fantastic Zen game. I mean, I remember from when we were playing it, it was like just hours would go by and we like, holy crap, we only meant to play for a couple hours today, and we ended up playing 7 hours or something.
I think the very first time that we were playing together, and we usually only play together for a couple hours or something like that, I think it had about 6 or 7 hours
Yeah,
had
that's what I
passed
recall.
by. We're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's time to go get food. Yeah, we've been playing for how long?
And you both reminded me of the good that I had thought of. I finally, it clicked in my brain. It's tangential what you started talking about, Zay, but the thing this game does better than any other survival game I've ever seen is the fact its setting is what makes it. It's the raft. You're all pretty much tethered to that raft. So in survival games, there's always the propensity for people to F off and go into some random direction on their own and go do things. But you really can't. You're stuck in a raft at sea. You go too far out and Brucey's just going to eat you, right? Like you can't avoid him forever. I mean, sure, you might be able to kill him, but he's going to keep being a pain in your butt. Like you can't just swim off on your own forever. You can't stand an island without being on the raft forever. Like you have to come back. And I really like the fact that it focuses everyone on a group communal thing of taking care of the raft. Like you don't all necessarily have to build it, but you're all just, that's where you are as the predominant. And when you go on away missions for like the story islands, you go as a group, right? And I like that.
Yeah, I guess that's unlike the other game that we've been playing, all three of us and another friend of ours, the game Grounded. I love Grounded. Grounded has one of the best base building setups that I've seen in a game. As far as you can actually, set up let's say, for example, a wall. You set it up on there, and even if you don't have enough of the ingredients to build the wall, other people can come in and put in the ingredients, and then the wall is built, which is great. But the problem that I do have with Grounded is the fact that people can F off all over the place. And for hours all over the place, at a time, you cannot see each other. You may be able to hear each other because of the fact that you're on Discord or whatever voice that you choose. Even in game voice, I do remember it has one, if I remember correctly. But you may not be able to see each other because you're doing different things forever. In Raft, like Tath said, you're pretty much, oh, you're gonna go into an island. Okay, let's go into an island and do a couple things. To progress the game, you all gotta get back on that raft.
Yep.
And continue.
The one thing I'd close this out on Raft, unless someone else has something else to talk about. I think this game works better as a group. I think you can play it as a solo game, but it's going to be very, very hectic, especially in the beginning. I mean, even when we played 3-player, there's so much you need to do. Like, your raft is too small. You're constantly trying to get all the food for that, and you're trying to solve wood or food, and you're trying to solve water. Like, there's just so many things going on that even with 3 people, it can be really crazy. But that said, you get through that stage really, really fast if you've got 3 people, and then you kind of morph into like the Zen, where you can just float along, picking up all the junk you find in the water, hitting islands, and you can just, like, time can just fly by, as we alluded to before. I can't recommend Raft enough myself. Anyone else got some closing comments on that?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
On. No, go ahead, please.
Sure. So for me with Raft, I played it single player before Tatharis really ever had it, I think. And before we'd ever even talked about it. And it was a very different experience single player. But I played it in a very different way. It was a lot more slow, meditative, a lot of basically just RP in my own head of what's going on with this person's life, like how lonely and isolating it must be, and doing things in the game that really didn't advance me from a crafting perspective, but fed into this narrative I had in my own head. I mean, we're all pretty hardcore role players here anyway. So, and speaking of Grounded, right? One thing I liked about Grounded that's minor is that the characters that you all play have enough of a personality to where, as we were playing together, like the bunch of RPG tabletop nerds that we are, are inventing little stories. Me as the nerd character, has a crush on, all the girls and, trying to impress her. And, she doesn't even know that I exist.
Oh
And
yeah, I played
it's fun.
Hoopsie, who is like the completely oblivious jock.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was fun. It
That
adds
was
a
fun.
lot for me, just to do things like that, just because, we're all natural role players. So yeah,
Agreed.
it worked out.
Well, you hit on what I was going to say, that I think that Raft as a single player, you do have to approach it from a different way.
Agreed.
You kind of have to take it slow and pretty much think about what different things that you have to do on that particular day to get them achieved so that you don't starve, that you are progressing. It's not about, okay, you have 2 other people in our case. They're with you. You can take this, you can take that. Okay, is everybody doing what they're supposed to do? Which is a little bit more hectic. With single player, you can afford to a certain extent, because otherwise you might die from starvation or being too thirsty if you don't get the things taken care of. You can afford to just take your time and do things a little bit more at a time.
Yeah, that's pretty true. And that's what I did. It's not that I didn't progress, but it was much slower and more deliberate, and you really
Mhm.
plan your route as to where you want to go. And because there's so much to do, it's just chipping away at a giant boulder, as a single player person. But that wasn't bad, and it was fun doing sort of pointless things too, in service of the RP. But yeah,
Getting your
it's
little shoe and planting a potato in it, even though it's
Yes.
useless.
right. So because why not? It's stupid, but yeah. I think on our raft too, I built a weird little shrine
Mhm.
to the sea gods or whatever. I don't know what I did, but
Yeah.
that
And
was
then
pretty
I had
fun.
a bunch of Hello Kitties at the front near the prow of the barge
Right, they were guarding the front of the ship from monsters or
from
something. I don't
Brucey.
know.
Yes.
Yes, not doing that good of a job, but
No.
it's
Not until
symbolic.
not until you reinforce it. And you actually made me remember one other unique thing about Raft. It's the only survival game where I don't play the person who kills things. You two dealt with Brucey. The only time I fought was when we went on away missions, and you had to when we were going to some place to further the story, and you have to fight. It's the only time I fought. I basically just focused on building it, like reinforcing this raft and setting up like the nets. So we had like the passive income, as it were, coming in, right? And then putting that stuff in the junk and making sure we had tokens so that we could go to the trader. Like that's the type of stuff I focused on. I left Brucey to you guys. You guys would kill Brucey, and while he was distracted, I'd go into the next to an island. I'd go down and look for metal resources and stuff. And you'll never hear me say that again in any other survival game.
Look,
Sure.
me and Brucey had a deal. I jump in the water and I kill him. And I make sure to get the meat on the grill for Jaedaen to cook and give you the head to be able to produce the what is
the
it, oils?
biodiesel
Yeah, the biodiesel.
or biofuel, whatever it's called.
Biofuel, yeah. So, that's the deal. He understood it from me. It's like I jump in the water, kill Brucey, come back home. Yeah, one of the things I really liked, and I don't know where it started with me in the game, is just being able to steer the raft once you get, the sail, or even further once you get the engines going and the wheel to be able to steer it around, to be able to do fishing while steering the ship or steering the raft. I just stand up there, throw a fishing line out, and I'm here. Okay, I'm steering. I'm looking around. Where do we have to go? We're going in the correct direction. What else do I have to do around here? Oh, I've got my plants running because I usually put them near the captain's area, as I could like to call it. And oh, look, there's a fishing line. Reel it back in, throw in another one.
Yep.
Fun times.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a good one.
We good for another one? Because I got one. It's a good dovetail.
Yeah. Go for it.
So still following the survival thought process, a very, very different style. No sharks, but lots and lots of zombies. In the immortal words of Other Joe from Angry Joe Show, hey guys, want to play a zombie game? And that zombie game is Project Zomboid.
Ah, yes. That's another game that I want to get back into.
It's not extraordinarily accessible. There's a lot that you have to struggle through to get to the good stuff, but the good stuff is worth it. It's worth struggling to that.
The crafting and the loot interface are probably some of the biggest hot garbage I've ever seen in video games. But to be fair, they are supposedly working on it, and this game's been in development in early access for 10 years, but please do not let that turn you off. It is probably one of the best early access games ever existed. And to Zay's point, I totally want to play this. I want us to record this at some point. I've just been waiting for the next big update, which should be P42, which should add a whole bunch more stuff, like just crazy amounts of good stuff. But the reason I like this game is, well, I'm a sucker, as we've talked about before, for dystopian stuff and zombie stuff, which is great. But like surviving in 1990s rural Kentucky and Louisville, as I've heard from authority from people who live down there, that's supposedly the right pronunciation of Louisville, as I would say it, from not being from there. But it does so many so many things right. Exploring is fun, and their tagline, as I recall, is "This is how you died," which they ain't joking. The game is not friendly. You will die. I think when Zay and I first tried this out the first night, I think I went a minute and a half, and then I was dead. Like, it did not take long. But once you start understanding how to like control the game, and you start getting used to the interface, or if you have a nice Sherpa help protect you and give you some tasty weaponry right off the bat, you can start going. I love that it has so many different like ways you can play a character. My favorite was playing the war vet, and of course, talking about our RPG brains, I made myself a war veteran turned police officer who's like super alpha male, and my goal was just like to wade into the zombies and take them out. That was my thing. Purge the land and reclaim it for society, even there's only 3 or 4 of us left.
So for me, what I liked about this game is the touches of realism in terms of how it sort of felt in a certain way. You start off in the zombie apocalypse. The TV is on. You can watch TV, gain skills from TV. And then a week or two later, there's no more TV. Society has devolved to a point where that's just not possible. You'll hear helicopters overhead that draw the zombies, and there's so much boredom and downtime that is interspersed with the going out and the handling of the zombies to get equipment and such. The driving is really brutal, and you should drive slow because if you crash, it's horrible.
I don't care what Mal says. Speed Demon is a death curse. It is not a boon, but he seems to like it.
Whatever works for you. Normal driving is fine, but for me, you have to rack a semi-automatic pistol in order to get it to fire it after you load the magazine. It's really just small details like that at first you're like, "Come on, really?" But as you get into it, the simulation feel of it, it really does feel good. And you like those details. I like realistic simulators. I always have. So that's a part of what endeared it to me as well.
There's certain things that I have heard that they are working on fixing. One of the issues that I had with the base building was the fact that something as simple as you could not put the stairs in more than 1 or 2 different positions to be able to get to a second floor.
I believe they actually fixed that recently, which is amazing.
I know, just something simple as the stairs are something that's necessary. But there's things that you can do to be able to either build your own base. Mind you, there are issues with that because the game may not recognize that as an indoor area. So there is weather in the game. You do have rain and fog. So if you build your own base or you're an extension, at least before when we last played it, they might be fixing it in a future update. It may not recognize it as an indoor area.
I want to say that was either on the short list for things that were going to be fixed or was fixed in some of the recent updates. To your point, I've been eagerly following this consistently, and I read their Thursdoids off and on just to try to see how close are they? Is it coming? Are we within a few weeks? I keep waiting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing it again. There are different options in the games to make it as brutal as you want it, or I believe it's called Apocalypse or Apocalyptic in the game. Or if you just want to have a zen time and just being able to explore and you doing your base building and being able to go out there and kill the zombies, clear up the land, you can do that as well. You can even set it up so that the zombies do not respawn, which that can be an issue that can be a difficult setting on its own. If you have the zombies respawning quite often, that may keep you from being able to explore out from your base and keep you from being able to progress on the things that you want to do in the game.
And Jaedaen, if you didn't know, you can even enable runners, like runners during all time, runners only at night. I will never enable that setting because it ain't joking. If you get a couple zombies on you, you can die very easily. All it takes is one to stun lock you, and then they will just take you to the ground and eat you in no time flat.
I don't think we've ever enabled that setting because I know that Tath believes in Romero zombies, not the other.
Not the 28 Days Later zombies.
Yeah, exactly.
I love 28 Days Later as a film.
A great movie.
But and it does one of the best things, small side since I love zombie stuff. It's one of the few films that actually addresses how long they'll live. Let's ignore the fact that if it's in real world, they'll all die by insects within 30 days. But it was one of the few where they test is like, oh yeah, they're going to starve. You very rarely see that. So I give 28 Days Later tons of props for that. But past that, it's Romero zombies, ride or die. That's my favorite type. Although in video games, I don't mind there being special zombies in like Left 4 Dead or Back for Blood or whatever. But it adds variety, yes. But in this game, oh hell no. The basic zombie is enough. And when you play it, you slowly keep cranking up more and more zombies, and they will kill you very quickly.
Pretty true.
That's
I do
all.
like.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have one small thing. So one thing to look forward to. This is one of the reasons why I'm eagerly waiting. The next two big updates that are kind of being. They have two teams that are kind of working on them in tandem. One is focusing on overhauling the craft system. Thank God, because even with a mod to improve the craft interface, it still sucks. But also they're going to be expanding the technology. So with the idea that you can play a colony for literal years in game. So think of being able to, at some point, the power, electricity, it's water, it's all gone. And you're running out of resources for modern era, and you transition to like a medieval setting. So think like Hilltop in The Walking Dead, where they had a blacksmith who made them spears in the show, and probably other stuff. Like they're supposed to be expanding the tech so that you can go all the way down that and make horse and buggy. They're working on animals so that you can have animal husbandry going on, and there's a bunch of stuff coming. It's all good. And if they can improve the UI as well, oh my God, the game will be accessible to so many more people. That's all, and that's the last I have to say on like things to look forward to. But I can't recommend Project Zomboid enough.
Yeah, it's a good one for sure. It's one of those games that I would definitely much prefer to play multiplayer. I can only imagine how crazy it would be single player. But got some fine friends here to play it with, so we'll have to get back into that at some point.
As with all zombie games, I don't play them solo. These are so decidedly group things, because I think I've mentioned this before. Like the worst part of every zombie game is the very beginning, because they always force you into some stupid freaking tutorial while you're by yourself and you're in the dark and you don't have a flashlight, you don't have a weapon, and it's creepy ambience. And I'm always scared crapless. But once I can get out of that and I start the multiplayer and I can see the other person, like then my brain goes, okay, it's just a game, I'm good. And then I was like, it's zombie smashing time. But when I'm by myself, oh no, it's always so creepy for me. I can't stand horror games. But zombies, for some reason, I love them. Anyway, with that note, Zay, you want to go next?
Sure. And I will keep along this line as well. Speaking of zombies, 7 Days to Die.
I thought about that. Okay, we're still in the survival genre. Good one from each of us.
Yeah, this is one of these games that you, Jaedaen, played very little with us, but it's something that Tath and I have played a lot throughout the years. And of course, once again, survival genre, zombies are the main thing. Hell has gone on the world. You have these different areas, different biomes, freezing cold snow areas. There's forest areas. There's areas that have been burnt down, even desert areas in just one map. And you're going around the map trying to find the resources that you need to survive. And this game is also in early access, but it is constantly in development. And it is a fantastic game. They have been adding so many things to it. The people at Fun Pimps.
Best game company name ever.
Yes.
That is a good name for sure. When it comes to this game, I think I played it once with you all, and I'm not sure if it was just a mood thing or whatever. I just really didn't latch onto it at all, and it just didn't. It just really didn't grab me. And maybe if I played it again, it would. I find a lot of what I like and don't like has a lot to do with the mood that I'm in the first time I'm exposed to that. So I usually like to try to give things at least a couple of tries in different headspaces. But
we could try it when the next big alpha comes, or I guess when the next big alpha is launched and stable. We can try again right from the beginning and launch up a new thing and see how you like it.
Starting from the beginning might be good. Maybe that's why I think I joined your guys' existing world, and maybe that's why I felt a little alienated because I didn't know what was going on.
The challenges with 7 Days to Die that it has is it doesn't have a story yet. I think that's on their roadmap at some point to happen. It's really just a progression curve. You start out with no skills, you suck, and you need to survive, like all survival games. And there's 4, 5, 6 trees, I think, that you can go in that have different abilities that focus on different things and kind of lend themselves to a particular play style. But there's some perks in some trees that are kind of useful to everyone. So you rarely just go down one tree. You're kind of splitting out to make that character you want, right? And you had the advantage of, like, you joined us late. It was like, well, we didn't start you at level 1. We're like, okay, we're gonna give you a bunch of free experience. Oh, here's some free gear. So you didn't do any of that development. You just and then you bummed around on for like a day or two as we were preparing for Horde Night, and then you saw our base, you saw how we had defended. So yeah, I don't think you were like vested from that perspective. So
No, I wasn't.
I do agree. It's something that with 7 Days to Die, I think you have to experience it from the very beginning so that you can be roped into it.
yeah,
I
let's
agree.
put it on the list. We'll put it as something that we try and record a day and watch as we horribly die. It's an interesting game. It's all about realistically, when it boils down to, I mean, it's kind of a Zen game for me, but it's all about exploiting zombie AI. You can't avoid the zombies. If you find a bunker underground, because there are some, they call them points of interests. That there are at least one or two that you can find an underground shelter, and it'll be populated first. You can kill all the zombies, but the problem is, if you do that, zombies can break. It's Minecraft with zombies and more adult. So like every block, that's how it's built. Everything's a block. The zombies always know where you are, and on Horde Night, you get a massive wave of really nasty zombies coming at you. And if you're underground, they know that they'll dig to you and break through the ceiling and just overwhelm you. So really, you have to find some way to exploit their AI to either funnel them in a specific place where you can shoot them, get a kill box, use traps or whatever. I mean, you can just take over a barn and be on the and be upstairs. But if there's no ladder to you, they're going to start breaking all the pillars until the structure collapses.
Yep.
Right? Like, so it's not a perfect game. You could disable Horde Night, but I think that defeats half the purpose of the game. But that's part of the thing of it. So you just if you get into it and you enjoy it, great. There's different things, but I mean, like, someone has to focus on the base. Hopefully, multiple to at least get some basic setup. But to fund that, you need the resources and whatnot to actually keep going, right? I mean, you could make your base out of dirt, but dirt is really easy to break. So it's not going to last long. So
one of the neatest things about this game that I found has been the community.
Yeah.
Just even seeing what the community on YouTube, what they've posted, that they've created as far as a base, and even the smallest of things. For example, just as a platform, stairs that go up to a platform to go to where you're standing, so that you can use the fact that you are limiting the space that's getting to you for Horde Night. Did I say whore or Horde Night?
Horde Night.
That's a different game entirely.
Yeah.
I just realized I think I said whore. Horde Night. There you go. Hard D. I may cut that out.
You shouldn't.
It's more natural this way, just to be fair.
Yeah, I know. The fact that it's funneling the zombies the way that they're getting to you so that you can pick them off one by one by one. It's something as simple as a platform, or something as complicated as a Killboxicon, where you have this maze to be able to get to you, and they're going through traps and things are shooting at the zombies. And it's amazing the things that the community has done with this game when it comes to be able to do defense.
Yeah, for better or worse, the community is in an arms race with the developers, because people find a way to break the AI. They've done crazy things. Like at one point, there was like doors that open and close, and you could, if you set it up right, they basically suspended over the open ground. and there was just no way for a zombie to get to you, so they just all sit below you, and you could sit on that. Well, then they fixed that. Then there was things with half blocks. Then there was things with, all sorts of crazy things with the ragdoll physics. Like like I said, it's a nonstop escalating war with the community, the best and brightest figuring out ways to exploit it. Because at the end of the day, building a base is fun, but you have 7 in-game days between horde nights, and we know a very Luddite, very basic way to make a fun, functional base that works. That's not ridiculously hard to make, but is an infinite time sink for keeping up or to keep it working. And that is basically we make a giant like column, say like 5 by 5, 6 by 6, I don't know, something like that, of cement with multiple floors. It's shooting platforms. It's got a floor for farming, floor for crafting, yada yada yada. And then around that, we would just make because it's basically square. Because remember, everything's a block. Just rings of traps, of spike traps, just all around it. And so the zombies would come from a direction, and they'll just slowly die on the traps, breaking them and getting closer and getting closer. And you can kite them so they come from different directions and whatnot. But then you have to replace all that, which means you have to go out and have a renewable source of wood or iron, depending on if you've upgraded them. And it works, but you spend most of your time getting the resources to keep that up and running. The community is much smarter than our basic design. They have come up with really stupid things where it's like you just have one log and you use all these little half blocks, and then they trip and fall down, and then they walk around and they'll keep going in endless circle and that. Like there's all these amazing things they've done, and we've tried to experiment with some of those, but at the end of the day, it takes a long time to build a base. So you need a starter base, and then you can work into like your mega death structure, but it's a full-time commitment to build that. So
I remember some of the bases that we would start out at, they were already built, and it was usually the church in town.
Oh, yeah.
We would go to the church, reinforce it as best as possible with the minimal things that we had, and then go about a block or two down where there is a huge patch of land and go, okay, Tath, let's start building a farm of trees.
Yep.
And we'd spend hours upon hours just planting seeds to grow trees, to be able to use that resource for upgrading the church and be able to build upon it and reinforce it and be able to actually, because it does take a lot of wood for those very simple spike traps that go around, because we knew that we have 7 days to be before that horde would come at us. And it does get, as you level up and increase your skills throughout the game, it gets rougher and rougher.
Oh yeah, the suicide bombers are the worst.
Yeah, and then you have also the vultures are coming at you from the sky. So even if you're up in a platform, you have to watch out for those damn freaking birds who are coming at you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. Overall, I think I would give the nod to Raft and Project Zomboid first, but I love 7 Days to Die. And actually, we played 7 Days to Die before the others. I'm looking forward to a new alpha. Whenever they have one, we definitely should do a day and play some and see how it goes. There's also mods for this game. Mod support through Steam is a desire of theirs before they officially call it good. I doubt that'll be in the next alpha, but one of the next couple. They've been doing, they average an alpha year and a half in between, sometimes a little bit less.
They even have some people in the modding community creating content, such as altering the game itself. So that instead of you being a regular guy who's going ahead and trying to find, the required resources to survive, that you are actually a spellcaster.
I love the concept of the mod. I don't like how it's balanced. I'm not good enough at the game to play it. That's what we ended up after our testing. We're just not good enough the way it's designed. But I really like it. What was it called? Mystic, Warlock, something?
Off the top of my head, I do not recall. I can look it up, but that's fine. We'll probably move from that.
I'm sure you could go 7 Days to Die Magic, and that'll find it.
Right.
Anyway, it's being actively supported. Dude's doing a fantastic job. If 7 Days to Die is not hard enough for you, go look at that. There's plenty of mods to make the game even harder. I'm just looking forward to story. And on that note,
So what do I want to talk about next? There's a very sort of little known game that reminds me a lot of one of my favorite sort of story based like Cthulhian type games, Cultist Simulator. Um, but I think I want to talk about Strange Horticulture, which feels very much in style to that game. And it's very interesting and it's very atmospheric, and I love a game with a lot of really strong atmosphere. You know, the story is good, it's a good writing, but mostly it is kind of one of these small games where people come in and they want to do various things, and you are a horticulturist, you have access to all these magical plants that do various magical things. There's one plant that will transform its leaves into a lock or a key that opens any lock, for example, and you help the people around you in this particular village that you've set up shop in here. And there's some annoying characters, you can either decide to help them or hurt them, but essentially it turns into a game where you're very humble horticulturist, and you sort of become embroiled in this struggle in a sort of very Cthulian cults versus this cadre of witches. And it has that sort of dark kind of that goth phase that I went through as a teenager kind of feel to it, which is really nice. But I would say it's half puzzle game because you have to figure out what plants based upon this almanac that you have is going to help you. You have to identify the plants. You don't know what they are because you're collecting them in the wild. You tag them, and at the end of the game, essentially, you can decide to help either the cult raise Cthulhu, or stop it, or become the Cthulhu god, avatar or whatever. And I'm probably giving away a lot here, but I should probably shut up. But if you want, excuse me, if you want an interesting game that's is a lot, it's cheap and it's fairly short. I think it's like 5 or 10 hours. Um, but something just very different, and I think it's sort of based on kind of Victorian England in terms of the setting. But really, it's just more about atmosphere and writing. But we've talked about this before. I love good writing in a game, and this game does have some interesting writing for sure. Um, so when it comes to these games that none of you guys have ever played, we can go through more of those because it'll just be a quick, short soapbox. I feel like I don't imagine either of you will have any thing to say about it.
you had me at a cult and narrative, and then you said puzzle, and I went hard pass.
Well, it's a puzzle in so much as you basically have this almanac of this is this particular plant. It does this. Here are some characteristics about this plant. I need to match those characteristics to what I see on the screen of the plants that I have. If that turns you off, that's the puzzle elements, and it's not really that difficult. But if that turns you off from the narrative, totally understandable. Then you should not play it.
That's a side conversation with video games, but I am. We do it in our tabletops too. Puzzles are such a hard thing to get right. The puzzle you're describing isn't awful, and I played old school Zork, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been drinking with Booze Miller again? I think that was his name.
I can't remember, but Zork is one of those classic examples of old computer games that were so opaque that they were completely impossible to suss out yourself, because oftentimes the solutions were so nonsensical. And a lot of old adventure games had this problem
Yeah.
as well.
Played Space Quest, played King's Quest.
Sure, very much in that vein. And I think that just had more to do with the fact that video games, computer games in particular, were such a new medium that they were really just flying blind at that time. And a lot of what we know today about game design just didn't exist then.
Well,
Um,
we're encountering an even new problem in video games.
and
I
what's
think
that?
it was related to puzzles. I think Secret World sums it up the best, and that is 3D open worlds don't work good for puzzles. It's really easy to miss
Yeah,
something, even if you give icons and say this is the area that
yeah,
the puzzle's existing in. Now, Secret World did every freaking offense that you could possibly imagine. Like, you need to actually do more, have been in the military and been a Morse code decoder to understand how to do their Morse code puzzle, because it pulled no punches. It was long and it was super fast. And if you weren't a skilled decoder of Morse code, good luck, bro. Basically just, it was either
oof,
you basically look up the solution, or they'd be like, yeah, the solution's somewhere in this circle. This circle is the equivalent of a 20 square mile area. Go figure it out in a 3D open world. That's a problem. I
no,
liked
it isn't.
I
Yeah,
liked everything about Secret World other than their puzzles. It was also a kind of an MMO,
mhm.
and a lot of these puzzles only one person could do something. And these puzzles, like if you tried to solve them naturally, if you're lucky, it was 45 minutes to a couple hours. Good luck being the people who have no interest in puzzles or are just stuck as part of that party.
And the puzzles were interesting, but one of the things that I had a problem with Secret World, and then we'll go back to the
Yeah,
other topic that we were talking about, um, was the fact that it understood and it was built into the game that the players had to go search for information on the net.
hmm
If I remember correctly, because it's been years since we've played the game, I don't even think it has servers anymore. I think even it had built-in browsers for
I
the
think
game.
that's correct.
So
Wow.
you had to go out and look up stuff that they put up in the internet for helping to solve some of their puzzles. Talking about, I understand you're trying to immerse people into your puzzles and everything, but you're also pulling them out of the game. You
Yeah,
really are.
I'm sorry I got us sidetracked on puzzles, but it comes down to I'm not a big fan about how puzzles are usually or added into games. Either they're stupidly simple and I can just bang, 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 figure it out, but most of the time they're just not done in a way that is enjoyable to me. And I'm more than happy just to look up the solution, get it done, and go on to the parts of the game that I actually came to play the game for. So nothing against Strange Horticulture. I like that it has cats, and the cat knocks a plant off the window in the little thing. I was watching it on Steam, the little intro, their little
Yeah, you
promo.
can pet the cat
Hey, all
over
of
and
that
over
sounds good.
again.
I'm just puzzle
I
games
know
are
you
just
love
not
cats.
my thing. I think Zay
Sure.
might actually really like that game. It looked like it
It
might be up her alley.
it does
It won't
seem
get
like
my
that.
vote only because, like I said, it's too puzzly.
You might like that. But yeah, that's my quick blurb about strange horticulture. In regards to puzzles, I guess to finish off here, when it comes to really interesting puzzles that I almost always at least, enjoy, it has to be these programming puzzle games, like all the Zachtronic games. Have you any of you ever played any Zachtronic games?
I have not.
No, mm-mm.
So the Space Chem was sort of the early one. It was definitely rough, but they went on to do a bunch of them. And Factory is one of the more popular ones. But essentially, they are games that have abstracted programming in different ways that have you solve a puzzle. And really, it feels a lot like what I enjoy about my job. As a tech guy. Um, Sometimes I'm not in the mood to play those because I'm done with work. Let's just do something that's as far away from work as possible. But sometimes you really want to get into that, and all the Zachtronic games are great. Actually, it's a studio that is, I think, shutting its doors finally. That they've just released a game that's sort of all of the ideas from all of the games that they haven't produced yet. Exapunks is a great one. That's like a cyberpunk um, themed one where you have to control these little nanobots that sort of configure reality. That's pretty fun. But It seems like you might be interested in those. As far as I know, you like those types of games. Did any of you ever play Hack and Slash? That was a pretty fun one.
I have not.
I have not. No.
That's a good one as well. It's a Double Fine game, which is kind of a bizarre choice for a sort of programming game. It starts off very easy and accessible. You hit an enemy and you decide to change their flag from the enemy to friend, or you set them with 0 hit points and it kills them, or you decide to make them spawn another one of themselves every other second, and pretty soon the entire game is just full of 1,000 of these creatures. But then later in the game, actually, you dig into the Lua code itself in an abstracted form that allows you to go way deeper. The problem with that point is, I think that that's the point where people that are not programmers are going to be turned off because it gets way too way too hard. It's a massive difficulty spike for people that are not into that.
Right.
But very cool game
I can
regardless.
code. I'm not good at it, and I use brute force very slow code. So I'm glad that's not my day job anymore.
I'm a poor coder. I can glue things together. I can make stuff work mostly, but I would not call myself a real developer, although I have high standards when it comes to development. And I feel like so many developers in the tech world are not that good anyway. But this is an entirely different topic. This is not tech podcast. This is gaming podcast.
Well,
so let's move on to another game, I guess.
Got one that I know you and I both played, and I think when we did our Disco Elysium love letter, we didn't mention it, even though it was the third peak of my triangle, and that is Citizen Sleeper.
Yes.
I think the tagline for Citizen Sleeper was something along the lines of role playing in the aftermath of capitalist dystopia, destruction, Armageddon. I don't know, something along those lines. Anyways, you play a person who has been pulled from their human flesh body and put into a android thing. So you're not necessarily human anymore. You're just a copy of a human. And you escaped whatever happened, and you end up on this space station that is like completely falling apart. And you just go and you have these amazing stories, talking to people, slowly dealing with your immediate needs for survival. And then once you meet those, you have more time to go talk to other people and fulfill more higher level needs, and eventually get off the space station in some fashion through one of the, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 story ways that you can do it, I think. And the game did it so well that despite the fact that I had basically quote unquote won the game and I had escaped in a pretty satisfying way, I was like, no, I want to go back. And, once you finish it off, it starts you right before you finish that final way of getting off the station. And I went and explored a bunch more stories that I hadn't completed. And I think I got pretty much, I think there's a bad ending where like you die, like for real, or you don't escape, right? Like I think there's a bad way, but me being, as we've talked before, like the not optimized gamer, but like, I'm like, this is a game I must survive. I of course did everything possible to meet all my Maslow's hierarchy of immediate needs. Right. Sure. So then I'm like, all right, I'm set. I'm not going to die anytime soon. Now I can focus on looking at, and by doing that, I think I solved the cases that I could see could have potentially ended up being a very negative outcome for your character. But I'd already had those well-handed well before that would ever be a concern, because that's just how I approach the game. Like, I'm like, oh, I need to survive, do I? Okay. But at the same time, there's all these amazing stories. I really think you'll enjoy it too, Zay, but
I have so many games on my list to play.
It'll tug at your heartstrings.
Yeah, I have so many things to play, even some games I've played before, that it's just kind of like, okay, here's another game, yes, that you're talking about and you think I may like it. I'm going to put it on my list, schedule it for maybe 5 years from now because it's where it's at.
Sure. And for me, I played Citizen Sleeper. Excuse me. Since the first episode, you had mentioned it when we were discussing Disco Elysium, and since that episode, I played it through, and it's a again another wonderfully atmospheric game. As you mentioned, you are this robot of a copy of a human, and really, I think the whole identity of you being a copy of something else that used to be this sort of mythical, like actually really alive creature, the way that you perceive it and that the rest of society perceives it, sort of gives you this kind of inferiority thing in regards to how you feel, but at the same time there's a juxtaposition of you need fighting as hard as you can to remain relevant and to really make a name for yourself in this place, and I really
What's your
like that.
purpose? How do you fit in? Yeah.
There's a lot of that, and I really like that. Obviously, it's a cyberpunk feel in the way that once again the corporations are evil and basically care nothing about anyone, aside from their own profits. That's another running theme. Certainly not something that's rare these days in games for sure. But there were a lot of interesting stories. I think I completed most of them, not entirely all of them. A DLC came out right after I finished playing it, and I didn't go back to get the DLC. I think it was a
It,
free DLC
I think it was
update.
a free DLC, and it was like maybe 2-3 hours more of content. It
Okay.
was like one or two more stories. It wasn't a
I'll
lot
play it
of
again.
content, but I mean, the game's what, like 10 hours long, maybe,
It's not
maybe a little
that
longer.
long, but it really has a lot of punch narratively. And to your point, it's not as good as Disco Elysium, but I feel like it borrowed a lot mechanically in terms of the dice rolls and
Yeah.
in terms of specializing in specific skills. Um, I think I focused on the character that was more of a sort of the tech guy that went into the cyberspace of the station to do things there.
I was the
And
robot controller, the rigger, if you will, from my Shadowrun background.
sure, sure. Yeah, I guess I was more of the net runner type character, and it was interesting. I You meet a lot of interesting characters, characters that you can relate to that are, definitely more than one dimensional, which is always nice. I mean, if you're playing a game like this that's more narrative focused than anything else, really the writing has to carry the game.
Agreed.
And I
I think it
love
did.
games where that happens. And it did. It totally did.
The ending
Uh,
with the
yeah.
engineer and his daughter, that's
Yeah.
what put a tear in my eye. I was
No, that's what the best part of the game was,
There were
really.
other really good ones. I don't want to spoil it. The Mercenary, that whole story arc was good for a
That was a
different
good one.
reason.
Yeah.
There's just so, I mean, I don't want to spoil this game because it's so short. I really feel like people should play it if they didn't. I mean, it didn't have a super lot of buzz. It was on Game Pass when it first came out. Um, so some people probably got some views there, but it really deserved every kudo that it gets, and I can't recommend it enough. If you like narrative games, you should go play it. It'll make you feel something. Maybe not the
Sure.
same way I did, but I think it'll make you feel something.
Yeah, that's a good one. In a similar vein, I think of Game Deck as well. That sort of rode the wave of Disco Elysium as well. It was not nearly as good, and not as good as Citizen Sleeper either. I didn't think, but still interesting and definitely worth the playthrough.
I heard good
Good
things
enough
about it, but I never
writing.
played it.
Good enough writing to definitely carry you through it, and interesting. And there were a lot of new developments, twists, I guess. Not twists so much as you play through the game, you start to see things in a different light, based upon what you know now versus what you knew then, obviously. Um, but it's definitely worth playing, I would say. One of the things the game deck that did really well that I thought was really interesting was explore possibilities of future virtual worlds that are these like future MMOs that everybody plays that they jack into, and because you're a detective in this game world, one of the things you can do is be a cheater. You can like tweak the code of the world, but every world has these sort of rules, that are baked into the rules of the game, and that sort of weaves itself into the narrative of what's going on in a really interesting way that I don't think I've seen in any other game. And really, the price of admission is worth that alone. And the story is good. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's very ambitious and it really tries a lot of new things that I really got to give it kudos. I love ambitious, even if it wasn't, I don't think as good as it could have been. It really brought a lot of new stuff to the table, so
Nice.
worth playing, I would say.
All right. On that note, Zay's been quiet because we were probably putting her to sleep, despite the fact I was telling her, no,
No,
you
you're
really should
not.
play this game. How about I think I know what you should be talking about next, and I'm going to assume it's got a very simple acronym called ONI. Am I correct?
You are correct, but I'm going to leave that one for my last one because, and I'll tell a little story before I actually get into the game. So, before we started recording this podcast, one of the things that Tath told us to look, let's just limit to about 3 games per each one of us, things that we really want to talk about and try to discuss. And I looked over at Tath and I kind of said to him, do you realize my memory is sometimes like a sieve? That I don't remember things that sometimes I did even 5 minutes ago. So I was trying to struggle of games that I have played that I have really enjoyed. And I'll briefly mention one of them and then I'll get to the one that I'm going to actually talk about. The brief mention is to the game Wandersong, which is a game about a little bard that is going through the world, and you go through the world singing a song, just singing. The game is all about singing and interacting with people and solving puzzles and even fighting things through this little bard who is just likes to sing. And, he finds out that there's something wrong with the world. And the only way to repair it and to save the world is to find the pieces of a song so that once you have those pieces together, you can sing it and the world is saved. And it's one of these games that has a lot of fun in it, a lot of happy, a lot of emotions, even made me cry at the very end of all the run of emotions throughout it. So it's a fantastic game. I wanted to briefly mention that one because of the fact that I played it years ago. And going back to my initial thing that I mentioned, I cannot remember a lot of it except just the basic concepts. So I'm here going and struggling through the games that I want to talk about. And I don't know why it didn't hit me, Tath, because I am playing Dead Cells right now. I went back right now to the game Dead Cells, a game that I started playing years ago and loved it. It is frustrating as hell because it is pretty much the very first Roguevania, a roguelike Metroidvania type game. And I fell in love with it because I love Metroidvania games. But you go through it, go through the little different levels, trying to get upgrades to yourself and trying to get blueprints of different weapons that you can use. There's weapons like a torch, things like a glaive. You can even use a sword that follows you around and it tags items, and then you use the sword to, within a time limit, to kill those things to be able to do crits. There's even a weapon set that it is a gun and a sword. You hit people with the gun to allow to do more damage with the sword.
Oh, originally I was thinking you were talking the machete and pistol combo, but no, you're right. There's that one item that takes up both slots.
Yes.
And it is a gun and laser.
Yeah. And it is something that this game keeps me coming back. I may not play it all the time, but I do love Metroidvanias. I started out playing Metroid and Castlevania long ago, and it just, once I heard the very first time when that game came out, I said, okay, it's a Metroidvania. I want to try it. But then it hit me. It's a roguelike. So you go in, you're going through the devils. Oh, you die. Go back to the very beginning. There are certain things that you keep with you as you go along. So, for example, if you get some blueprints, if you finish the level, you can go ahead and see the blueprints in a listing from a store of, okay, you found a torch, which is a weapon that does fire. And once you get enough cells, each thing that you kill gives you cells, and you can use them to not only do purchasing of items at the store, but also do some upgrades to yourself as far as mutations. The mutations being able to do one is called necromancy. So every time you kill something, it gives you a percentage of your health bar back. And even when you get to the very last boss of a run, yeah, you see the game's end, but guess what? You may not have found everything because of all the different areas. And they're added so many DLCs to it. I think so far they have 4 DLCs, and the recent DLC that they just announced, which is the reason why it made me come back to the game, was a DLC called Return to Castlevania. They're putting Castlevania in this freaking game.
The question is, will you actually get to play as Alucard or whatever the name of the
or Simon Belmont? Probably not.
Maybe they talk to you or something. They could actually be in the game. I will assume that the boss of that piece will be Dracula. I would presume,
course,
but
it better be Dracula.
I mean, you could have Alucard as a mini boss. I mean, I could see that. I don't know why you'd fight one of the Belmonts, but hey, I was intrigued when I saw the thing for it for sure.
But it's one of the things, I don't know why I didn't think about it until now. So that is the game that it's just one of these games that I keep coming back to.
No, that makes sense. Those are 2 good quick hits. Why don't you talk Oxygen Not Included as the final large game on this? I'd like to give Jaedaen and I a quick chance to do maybe 1 or 2, maybe like here's a minute of 2 other games or something. And then we did have a kind of a mix / bad, a couple things on there I'd love to talk about. But why don't we wrap up the big chonkers with Oxygen Not Included?
Sure. I do. Before you start, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate your review on Wandersong. It's definitely on my wish list now. I will play it. So thank you for the recommendation.
On that note, it made me think of the super charismatic Nothing Else Bard D&D archetype. Like, because he's really, I mean, he's just such a lovable character, or affable, but there's no substance behind that, and that makes me love the character even more. He's just he's got a 20 charisma, and he just uses it for all it's worth, and he's got nothing else going for him. You'll love it. It really is a heartwarming game.
Yeah, I'm glad that Wandersong is in your list now, because it is, like I said, it does bring you through different emotions of friendship and love and happiness. There's even one section in the game that you're actually in a band with the little bard, and you're working in a band. But it made me cry at the very end because of all the emotions that it puts you through. And Tath is watching me play this game. He's like, okay, yeah, I feel it.
The greatest thing art can make you do is feel something, and feel something strongly, whatever that emotion is. And that's always what I'm looking for. So, yep, it's got me.
Lots of sighs, lots of chuckles, lots of pulling at your heartstrings. It's not a long game, but it's a good experience. I wouldn't have been able to tolerate playing it, but I really enjoyed watching it. You, Mr. Music Nerd, I think it will appeal to you on many, many levels.
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about playing this game at some point. So yeah, it's on my list. Thank you again. I'm not sure how I missed this one, but thank you.
So you mentioned Oxygen Not Included, and I can talk about hours and hours on this game. You realize this. So I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible. I know Jaedaen has played a little bit, probably not as much as me, which I've racked over 1,000 hours on this game,
Oh my
and
God.
still have not gotten to being able to build a rocket to get out of the planetoid. Yes, you can build a rocket to get out of the planetoid. I still have not gotten there. And it's mostly because of how I've approached this game. The game is a colony sim game that has to do with being able to survive the environment and exploring a space rock and being able to provide the needs to your duplicates or your people that you're working with to be able to progress your colony in there. How I approach this game is to be able to do a run from the very beginning and try to learn something new each time I run, because there are so many things that are complex in this game that if you do not have a dedication for being able to learn and the patience for it, this game will not grab you because can be that complicated.
Warning, be prepared to do math. Lots
Yes.
and lots of math.
Yes.
It's a spreadsheet game for sure. If you want to get deep into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do things like being able to keep your colonies happy, so to be able to keep them productive. If they do not get enough food, do not get enough to sleep, they become angry and they can start thrashing things around and destroying things in your colony if they have those traits. And each colony have colonists, or dupes as they're called, can actually have different traits. Some of them, if they're really happy, can do things like put up stickers around your colony to show that they're happy, or make balloons, or be very productive. But if they're not happy, they can do things like destroy things, cry very badly, or puke all over the place because they're not happy. One of the things that I really love about this game is the fact that because of how the boards are generated, they can be very random. You can have, in one run through, you can have different vents. These vents produce different elements for you to be able to have water or even metals or even gases to the area, so that the gases can be used to be able to produce power. And you run through that and you're fine. And you run up a new game and you can have completely different layout. So every time you get into game is a different set. I had one game that I pretty much ran through it and I said, oh, I love working with natural gas. Natural gas vents are great because they do not pollute that much in the atmosphere, in not atmosphere, in the area. Pollution is a factor you have to be aware of. So with it, they do not pollute as much. But the vents, one of the things you have to keep track of, whether it's gases or water or even the metal vents, is the fact that they have eruption times that they are dormant and not producing anything, and times that they are very active and they are producing that element that you need to be able to utilize what it is, whether it's gas, water, or the metals. So if you're producing it for power, if they are dormant and you're only using that one vent, you're effed. You're fucked. You basically have to get your dupes out there and having to use the wheels to produce power for you all the time.
Those are like little treadmills, right?
Yes, they're kind of like little mouse treadmills or hamster wheels to be able to produce power in there. One of the things, the very first things that, when having to deal with the knowledge that you have in the game is knowing the mass and the weight of gases. Hydrogen is much lighter than oxygen, so you have to keep in mind. Polluted oxygen is about the same weight that oxygen is, so that it's pretty much can hang around the same area. And then you can have carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is produced by many things. They're produced by the dupes. They're produced by power generators. One of the very first things that I love doing is you don't have that much when you first start out your colony. but things are producing carbon dioxide. Your dupes are producing as soon as they're walking around, they're producing it. So what you do is make your base area, your colony area, with an opening, a shaft that goes all the way to the bottom for the carbon dioxide to sink.
CO2 hole. Yep, that's what you do in the beginning for sure.
And then once you start upgrading and getting the knowledge through the research to be able to use that carbon dioxide for other means to be able to clear it out, or even being able to use that carbon dioxide because it does create a sterile environment with the carbon dioxide. So you can use it for being able to store, for example, your refrigerators to store your food at so that they do not get polluted, because things do get polluted. Once you're able to get further on, you can utilize that carbon dioxide more efficiently. It's one of these games, like I said, I keep coming back to. Tath every once in a while watches me play it, and I get to a point, it's like, okay, I'm good. I've gotten a little bit further along. I can stop now and start a new game, or I can put it down for about a month and restart another one.
1,000 hours. I'm
Over
sorry.
1,000.
I just wanted to just express my amazement and how many hours you have put into that game. It's incredible. I have 50, I think, and I'm new land, right? I don't know a tenth as much as you do, I'm sure, about that game. For me, I really like it, but it starts to feel too much like work after a certain level of complexity because there's a lot of complexity in that game, and I have to stop.
Yeah, I get it. It's and to be specific, I'm looking at Steam right now. It says my playtime is 1,192.3 hours. And
That's
I'm sure
so much.
compared to some of the longtime players of this game, I'm a noob. And I recognize that because the furthest I've gotten so far has been the last time I played, I was able to build a steam generator from a cold steam vent. And that's one of the things that you have to keep an eye on. The board that I was playing did not have any in the areas that I had explored, because it is different biomes that you have to explore. Some of them are slime biomes, some of them are ice biomes, some of them have overwhelming heat. There's a magma biome all the way at the bottom that you have magma. There's an oil biome area that you can actually use oil for generating and for creating. But I was able to, in the area that I explored, I found a cool steam vent. The problem with cool steam vent, they're good for being able to generate water, but you have to be able to utilize it better, you have to find a way to heat up that steam so that the steam generators can utilize it for power. In this last run, I was able to finally set it up to go, okay, I don't have a hot steam vent. I can try to see if I can use this. I was able to heat up the steam and set it up, and I was happy. And I said, okay, I'm done. I said, I walk away. I'm done.
There you
And I'll
go.
see you in about another month or so.
Yep, I understand the impulse when it comes to that game for sure. It's a great game, though. Honestly, how they handle the gases and really just the physics of the world is and it's such a contrast to like the super like goofy and silly like art styles, but then
Mhm.
you have all these sort of deep physics systems like underneath it. It's really interesting how they
But you
do
can
that.
also
I
do,
love
as
it.
I call it, like perpetual motion / perpetual energy type system. Like you make a loop which feeds on itself and then
Yeah.
solves your problem. And then boom, you've got that solved. As long as the gas vent doesn't go into a dormant cycle or something else. But like you can solve your problems. How do you deal with your heat? How do you, because you don't want your people to fry to a crisp, but if you unlock a volcano, there's a good chance that heat goes somewhere. You got to deal with it. There's a lot of problems that you need to solve, which appeals to me, but all the math and everything else, I could play it very goofy, but I would not get very far. Nowhere near what Zay has accomplished.
I did okay in my 50 hours, but at a certain point, it's like you have everything. There's a frustrating part of that game to me where you have everything perfect, and then something new gets introduced, And now instead
now
of the
nothing
project that I
works.
want to instead of the project I want to focus on over
Yep.
here, I've got to deal with this whole new ish problem, and it's like I don't have the setup for it. I'm gonna have to hack some stupid solution to it, and that's
Or
okay. Yeah.
Or you do what Zay does and she restarts the board and she goes at it again with her new knowledge, being more efficient, building up to the same spot,
And that's
and then
very
learning
cool.
something new.
And I did that too. Honestly, I restarted several times as well. But that kind of reminds me of Factorio. Have you guys ever played Factorio?
I know of it, but I haven't played it.
That was a game that I became obsessed with. I think I stayed up longer than I have playing that game than since when I was like 20 something. Like until like 5 a.m. And like that doesn't happen anymore. But really, it's just the lure of the automation and the lure of building a perfect system. And in that way, it's similar to Oni, but I highly recommend it. It spawned so many Factorio alike type games already because of its influence. But
We got in the
would
Steam
think
winter
that.
sale Satisfactory, which is not
Satisfactory.
exactly in the same vein, but seems like it will have
It's
some things, and I'm looking forward to trying that out at some point.
There are certain games that sort of change things forever for anything. It creates a new portal into a new type of experience that can be had. And Satisfactory is a child of Factorio, and
Got it.
Factorio started it all.
Well, the reason Satisfactory, I finally went, yeah, okay, it makes sense. It's like, oh, there's combat and stuff with your survival besides building your factory? Okay. I think I can find things that will hold my attention and not make me a boring, grumpy puss.
Same in Factorio. There are, as you create pollution in Factorio, actually the wildlife of this planet, you're just this lone engineer that crashed on this planet, and you want to make a massive factory that will get a rocket to get you off of the planet. And the more you pollute with your coal, power plants or whatever, the more the wildlife will come and try to attack you. So you need to build these automated defenses. And eventually it's manual. You run bullets to each turret or whatever, but soon enough you've got a fully sort of automated system of defense, and not to mention everything else that you need to build in order to get to this goal, and then other cool side projects, building power armor for yourself and stuff. But there's this one achievement called Lazy Bastard, and it's the hardest to get in the game. Like, you can manually build things, but the game wants you to automate everything. And with the Lazy Bastard achievement, you can only build 120 things manually for the entire game. No more than that. Everything else is automated. It's so difficult. I'm not, too much of a smooth brain to do that. So, but very impressive. And I've watched world record runs, and it is just unbelievable. It's a phenomenal game, but I've really played out of it. I think I've got maybe 200 or 300 hours on it, which again for me is
a lot.
like 1,000 hours, because I don't know, maybe I have ADHD or something. I don't know, but my attention span is not great when it comes to latching onto stuff.
No, that's fair. All right. Jaedaen, do you want to do like one more quick hit? I know you mentioned Cultist Simulator. I know you had another thing you mentioned to me of Noida. Is there one of those or both that you can do like a quick minute or something on, and then I'll mention something, and then we'll wrap up with our really quick on our mixed bad commentary.
I'll do something quick. So earlier I did mention Cultist Simulator in relation to the feel being similar to Strange Horticulture. And so I'll talk about Cultist Simulator. Cultist Simulator is a very unique game, and I love unique games. It's a game where you're looking at this board. It's like a game board, card games, where you deal cards, and those cards will have a sort of a timer, and when they've expired, sometimes they'll disappear. There's always a ticker for hunger. There's always a ticker for if you don't go to your job in X amount of time, you've got to beg for your job back, and you need money. But ultimately, this is the 1920s, obviously very Lovecraftian, inspired. But you've caught a whiff of again the occult. There's this sort of secret. I think I mentioned it to you before in the context of it's less Cthulhu-like and a lot more Aleister Crowley-like. Like we're talking old
Yes.
school occult stuff here, and as you get into this sort of occult universe and you build your own cults, you got followers. You can sacrifice your followers to gain magic. You don't generally want to do that because your followers are helpful, but you can, and it's kind of a cold world in that way. And the more you sort of uncover, finding these misty or musty tomes in these old sort of half forgotten bookshops and at these bizarre sort of high as half shut style like auction houses. um, you start to learn more about the world, and as you learn more about the world as the player, you realize, wow, this is incredible world building. This is excellent writing, and I really appreciate that. In fact, I'm a fan enough to where I'm very versed in the world and these weird sort of extra dimensional gods and this other dimension that you can travel to in your sleep. And beyond that, basically, so much of it is atmosphere. So much of it is sort of this plate spinning game where you've got to keep all the plates spinning at the same time, and you will die over and over and over again until you figure out what's going on and how to get through things. And in that way, it's kind of brutal. Like I could understand somebody not attaching to it because you'll die a lot until you figure out the mechanics. And the game intentionally doesn't have a tutorial to where it expects you to be this sort of, as a player, you're sort of in the same mindset as the character you're playing. You don't know what's going on, you don't know what's going to work, you don't know how these rules work, but you figure it out slowly together. And when you die, the person that is taking care of you finds your notes, and then the bug gets implanted, and now they've got to like find this like hidden mystery as well. So that's my
Does
short
it
little
have
spiel.
like
Yes.
roguelike qualities, like someone else takes over and then you're from their perspective, or is it just new every time?
New every well, this is a rogue like more than anything else. If you die, you don't it's not a roguelite. You don't get extra cool shit that will help you in the next run. It's just like, nope, you gotta start this all over again. And for people that don't like full roguelikes, I wouldn't recommend it.
Gotcha.
But
I like the
as long
theme. I don't know that I would hold my interest for too long. I'd probably get frustrated by it, but it does sound
there's a
very interesting.
There's a new one they call it the Secret Histories universe. Alexis Kennedy, the head writer. But there's a new book called The Book of Hours coming out, where you are a librarian in an occult library that's been burned down, and it's your job to collect as many occult books to rebuild the collection. That might have a different sort of gameplay loop that may be more amenable to your sensibilities, but I feel like lore-wise, you would really
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
It's
Oh,
very
theme
good.
wise, I love it. It's
It's a
awesome.
great it's a phenomenal theme. The writing is excellent. But if you can't get into roguelikes in that way, and it is brutal, um, I'll definitely buy the Book of Hours as soon as it comes out. I'm a fan of that
I'll wait for your
universe.
review. If it does it a little bit different, it's a little more accessible, I'll probably play it.
It
It's
might be.
definitely interesting. I just don't know that I get my money's worth, but it sounds very interesting.
Yes,
You
I
know
think
how it
you would
is.
like it. It'd make a great novelization, honestly. It'd be great if somebody, like, wrote a book about it.
Mm.
But there is this sort of, like, live action interactive art experience. It's kind of expensive, and it's in England, and I really wanna go to it. I might do it sometime next year, but I'm that big of a fan. And it's not a LARP, it's more of a if anybody's ever been to an interactive, like, theater event, where you're sort of in the middle of everything and you're walking around and there are actors around you. playing a part and you're exploring clues. It's that kind of experience, which is totally my bag. I love that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
that sounds cool.
Yes, but yes, that's what I have to say about Cultist Simulator. Go ahead with your pick there, Tath.
So I was trying to decide between Symphony of the War, the Nephilim Saga, and Rise of the Third Power. Of note, all of the games we've talked about, plus a few extras, including Noita, which you didn't talk about. I put links to all their Steam pages. Anyone could easily look them up. So in the notes, we probably will have all that stuff with the names of the games and links to them. So if someone's doesn't feel like looking it for themselves but are curious, hey, they can click on something. Go us. Supporting lazy but interested gamers. I've still been dithering. I'll make this really quick. I'll say Symphony of the War, Nephilim Saga. This game is clearly the inspired by Ogre Battle, which in concept I love, but in practice hated as a kid. I'd probably like it better now. And a little known Sega game called Warsong, which is built off which is a really crappy bastardization American version of Langrisser. It's the Langrisser 1 and 2, Langrisser 1, I think, game, but like really hacked apart or into a smaller thing. It does so many things right. Basically, you get units, which are usually special characters, though you can make generic characters be ahead of a unit. And then as time goes on, they can have additional units in there. So you can have a dude who specializes on using rifle characters. And then you can fill him up with a bunch of rifle characters in his group, which have a certain special thing they do. But you don't, when you play the game, it's a tactics map. You move the unit as a whole, and then you tell it to attack something. And then they auto do their attacks, and some units are better against different ones. I love the character who's like a dragon master. And by the end of the game, you have like 2-3 dragons, and they all fly. And she can go wherever she wants, and she just destroy things. But early on, she's kind of weak. The story is not the best story I've ever seen, but it's interesting. It's the second game in a series. The first game has nothing to do with the same mechanic style. It's a standard RPG, but I really like the Nephilim Saga. It does a lot of things right. It scratches an itch for a style of game that doesn't have a lot of them out there. It has kind of, it homages to Fire Emblem and other things. It's not an easy people can die permanently. I think it's only the main character. I don't know. It's been a while since I played. Anyway, I like it. That's all I'm going to say on it. If it sounds like your cup of tea, someone go watch. I know you're not going to play it, Jaedaen, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Not. I did love Warsong though. I played the heck out of Warsong back in the day when it was on. I think it was on Genesis.
Good news.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Genesis. Langrisser 1 and 2, which it was based on. I think it was based on 1. 1 and 2 is a package. You can buy them, the whole thing, and get the real experience on Steam right now. So I highly recommend it. I played those. I don't know if I played those this year or if it was last year. I don't remember when it came out, but I highly recommend those. So
I have the theme of Warsong running through my head right now, but that's the
Langrisser is an amazing series. There's a bunch of them. I hope they port some more. I hope more stuff gets ported to Steam. All right, that's good. So let's get into because I know we're running long today, but I'm not surprised for our first indie cast, the way we decided to do it. I had a couple of games that I'm not going to go very massive into detail, but they're honorable mentions because I still think they're good games and worth playing, but something hit in them not really the right way. And I know you had one as well. So let's break these down pretty quick. So I'm going to start with Underrail. I love Underrail. Besides Atom RPG, which is the Russian based, as in it takes place in Russia, inheritor to Fallout after Fallout 1 and 2. It's like a logical thing in the same, it could not quite in the same universe, but it's definitely inspired. Underrail is a similar thing where like something happens on the surface and now humanity's underground. It's a turn-based game, RPG. It's not easy. Making a build is a pain in the ass. I highly recommend you go out and search for like newbie guides. Assault rifle, at least at the time of when I played it earlier this year, is a pretty strong thing because assault rifles do these little bursts and they can just blow people away later on. You start out really shitty. I like the story. I like the environment. I like the mechanics. I got into the DLC. I hadn't finished the game because the DLC technically takes place before you finish. It's called Expedition. And I went and started doing the Expedition. And then the Expedition did what I consider a cardinal sin for this style. So when you're walking around, other things move and can see you and react. There's this one area where you go in and it takes away all of your equipment, and you have to get through and get a couple items to be able to get back to a place where you can get all your equipment back. And your equipment is what makes your character survive. If you're not built in a very specific way, this encounter is that can be it's just not fun designed. It is possible by like setting yourself up right, where you can walk past everything in a very specific way and get your thing. But as I was getting frustrated trying to do this, I saw a video and I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's not fun. That's not why I'm playing this game. And I was having a blast, even though it was hard to start, even though it took a while for my character to get running, and I will praise it all day long. This single event destroyed my fun. And what's even worse is, supposedly, at least at one point in a build at some point, if you went and did a different area first and did things in a right way, you unlocked an ability to bypass this so you didn't have to go through this hell. And it looks like that was removed. And fun fact, not knowing that, I had actually done it the right way, where if that was still in the game, I wouldn't have had to put up with this bullshit. So, dev, you're not smarter than your environment. This is a bullshit way to design an encounter. It took all the fun and all of my goodwill to the game and removed it. And you had a way that it worked better in the past and you took that out. I'm going to tell you, fuck you. I hope you learn and you do better, because Underrail was a great game until that point. But that's why it's not on my good list and it's in my naughty list.
Given that experience,
Just infuriated me.
I would have the same exact reaction that you did.
You
I would
can't
be
beat it by
yelling
the
at
mechanics
screen.
that are in the game. You have to play it in a
Yes.
very different style. That's not what the game is. Why?
That's so unfortunate because,
But if you didn't
I'm
play
with
the
you there.
expansion, if I had not played the DLC and I just played the core game, I would never have encountered that, and I'd have a very different experience. It's all just one area required to complete the DLC. It's a shame.
Sure.
So anyway,
Maybe, just not ignoring the DLC might be the way to go with that. But anyway, and that's a good, I really like that, right? Because for my game, there's so much I love about it, and there's so much that I want to get past a certain point that I can experience it because it's so fucking cool, and the writing is so good, and the way that it's framed is so interesting. It's framed as a stage play where you have these, in a drama play, you have the people in the black suits are like moving the sets around. Like they're in there too, and they're like, sometimes if something needs to be happening that you need to be focusing on, they're like pointing at that. Like the framing is very cool. The writing, there's so much metaphor to the writing, and it's so different culturally, being a Russian game, rural Russian at that. Um, you're this doctor that has come back from the city at your father's request, because stuff's going on that he wants you there for. And you get there, and he's not around anymore. He's gone, but you need to take over as a doctor for this village. Nobody trusts you because you left for the city, and they felt like you abandoned their village. You're not really a part of them anymore. And so you need to sort of gain their trust and be seen as the doctor, of this region that they need. And there's so much sort of rural Russian folklore in it that's so interesting, and and it's so brutally difficult. This is a thoroughly Russian game in regards to its cynicism. It does not care if you're having fun. It's there to present you an experience. And if you can't get through that quagmire of despair as you're playing through the game, because again, the writing is really good. If you can't get past a certain moment, which I can, I'm a softie in that way. you're not going to experience everything, and it just teases you. It's just like I wish I could get through this part. Like I got to the point where, as a doctor, I finally won the people's trust after a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, and then the plague hits, and the plague just destroys everything. And I wasn't ready for the plague, and it's just like, oh god, the despair that I have.
Here's the most important thing.
Yes.
I know what it is, but what's the name of the game?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't actually. This is. I'm trying to draw you in here through my description. That totally was intentional, by the way. It's Pathalogic 2 is the game. And Pathalogic 1 was good. Originally, Pathalogic 2 was supposed to have 3 perspectives, the doctor and 2 other characters. But you only have the perspective of the doctor in 2. If you play the first one, I think you can play all the 3 perspectives. But it's very cool. I like to call it the Dark Souls of walking simulators because it's just so brutally difficult.
I hate that term, but it some games just, it's very appropriate.
Well,
it's just
Such
overused.
a cliche, trite way to describe something, but
Tactics
because everybody
Ogre
knows
is the Dark Souls of tactics RPGs. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Continue.
It's just it's an easy way to express a concept to people, but you're right. And so there's so much I love about Pathalogic in terms of its abstract, brilliant writing, in terms of its wonderfully foreboding atmosphere. But I couldn't play past 3 or 4 days of the game. And there's so much good in there that I want to get through. It's just too brutal. There was another game like this, and I'll touch on it very, very briefly. This War of Mine was like
I've heard
that
of
as
that
well.
one. I heard good things about it.
Was a beautifully human and another well-written game that just got so bleak and so dark and really just weighed heavily on my soul that I couldn't complete it again. And there are some games, and it's like if I was watching it on TV, if I was watching a movie, that would be fine because there's more distance between you and the character if you're watching something from a third person point
So what
of view.
you're
But
saying is it's
the
The Road, the video game. Because that's how I felt about watching The Road. I loved it, but I will never watch it again.
I love the movie. I read the book as well, which was excellent. The book is much more fucked up than the movie. It's horrible, but it was such a good experience. But there's just enough emotional distance between me and the person that I can deal with. In fact, I love tragedy in terms of fiction, but if it's really well done and bleak enough in a video game, it's just too much for me to complete, honestly. And that's the problem that I have with Pathalogic too. And it's not a knock so much that it's mixed, it's just too much for me as a person.
Well, that's why it's not on a pick for the year, but you're like, it's worth noting someone out there is going to really like it. You don't say it's
So many
terrible. You
people.
couldn't do it. That's what Underrail. There's a very small community that loves that game. I back them. And not everyone's going to have the same experience as me. Other people would get frustrated and go, okay, they look up the YouTube tutorial, boom, they get through it, they're done. I was just like, I tried it a few times and it made me want to punch things just because it broke the social contract the game had with me by taking away all my stuff. There was other problems with that section. I'm done. I'm not going back to Underrail. It's not happening. I really hope they fix that because the fact that I found out that there was a solution and now it's gone that would have solved my problem pissed me off even more. But anyway,
yeah.
Let me finish it up with the last one, and it's a game that's a sequel that I loved the first one, and that is Hard West 2.
Okay,
it's Weird West. I love Weird West. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite genres besides zombies. Maybe because zombies are in it, not really, but mixture of occult, Cthulhu, and a whole bunch of things. I like the characters. I'm not saying the plot is unique or something you've never seen before. But the basic opening of this game is you're part of a gang that's going to rob this train to be your last big score. I'm sure you've never heard that before. But when you get there, it turns out this is a demon train run by a demon. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's one you've heard of before. My brain is blanking on what his name. I'll remember it when we're done recording. Doesn't matter. And then you decide to wager your souls against him in a competition, and guess what? He cheats. You lose your soul. Your best friend, who's part of your party, doesn't show up, disappears, and spoiler, he'll probably be a bad guy at the end of the game. But anyway, like, so then you're doing all these things to go get revenge, get your soul back, you know, and do things. It's a fun story. Mechanically, I like the concept of what they were going for. I believe they've added a patch that addressed some of it, but one of the things that really, really drags this game down that wasn't in the first one, because it's a turn-based shooty game, and people have different styles of ways they can fight, is that they put time limits, even on normal, everywhere. And there's many missions there's literally one way to solve the turn-based combat to complete the mission in time to survive. But the game also has RNG. So even if you do everything perfectly, you could miss a 70% shot, and now you cannot physically finish the mission, and you have to restart. That's not fun.
Yeah.
I played all the way up. I turned it down to easy, and I thought easy was in some ways really, really easy, in some ways not, because of the designs they made. I would have been happy played on normal. I started it on normal, and it just, the timers pissed me off so much I went down to easy. But there still were times where you have to do this very specific thing, and then you have bonus objectives, which are counterintuitive to what you need to do to actually complete the mission too. So like I said, you need that perfect run, plus you've got RNG. I got all the way down to like the second or third I was right near the end of the game. There was only like a couple missions left, and I'm like, I'll get back to this, and I haven't. So I think it was a really good game that had blemishes. I think people should try it. There might have been even more patches that I saw, but it was clear the developers went, oh, we missed the mark, and we're going to address this to make it a little bit more. They added even harder difficulty as well for people who are like, no, this is easy. You know, the type of people who love Dark Souls and all things, and the more you crunch their nuts, the happier they are. More power to you guys. That's not me as a gamer. Anyway, so they made it easier to address your average person. They made harder modes for the people that really want as much crazy challenge as possible. Double downing, triple downing on the timer is fine. It's probably in a better state now, and I think it was fun. Maybe sometime next year I'll get to it. I don't know, but fun game. Hard West 2. It'll appeal to some. I probably should have finished it, but either way, I enjoyed to some extent what I played, but it's definitely not a full recommendation, but it wasn't bad. And that's where I'll leave that.
I don't think personally that we should ever feel guilty for not finishing a game. My philosophy is the second I'm done having fun with a game, why continue to torture yourself beyond that? Now, I can understand if everybody's telling you, like, no, you got to get past this part. This is when it gets really good. It's like a movie or something. It's like, okay, in that case, I might, depending on how brutally annoying it is or whatever, power through certain things. But aside from that, we live in a golden age of video games, my friends, do we not? There's another great video game right down the corner that you can pick up. And, it's not like the 80s, 90s where there was, a dozen games that anybody could conceivably want to play at any given point, right? In the computer game space or whatever. Yeah.
You're not wrong. I agree with that to an extent. Sometimes I just want to finish a game to finish it, but like I was so close. I'd put up with all the bullshit and I'd gotten through it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I could have just finished it, but I didn't, because I was like, it's worn down my soul. And that was when I should have made that decision earlier so that I would have had more likelihood of picking it back up to try it in the future. Like I said, I like what they did with it. Just they made some missteps. If they'd had a couple more months and feedback from some early testers, it could have had a way better launch. I'm sad that it was kind of mixed at launch. I think it's gotten better. I didn't look at the Steam page. I should have, but it was still a good game. Anyway, on that note, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I know you mentioned and that being the last one, but I'd like to briefly mention one bad game
Let's
that
hear it.
all three of us have played, and probably will say a couple things about it and then make sure to throw it in the garbage. Hordecore.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It was what, like 4 hours? Like you think you're like in the middle of it and it's like, "Oh, all of a sudden all the content is gone." Like what the hell is up with that?
It looked like it was gonna be more roguelike, and so like maybe we'd fail and go back to the beginning or something, and that didn't happen.
And also remember all the connections issues that we had just trying to get multiplayer. And even upon
Yep.
multiplayer, sometimes we'd be desyncing so that you would not be seen in the screen by you, Jaedaen.
I remember that. It happened far more frequently than most. Just the netcode in that game must have been atrocious.
Yeah. And it's just, I'm here trying to think because I do try to give games as much of a chance as possible. And so
Agreed.
I'm here trying to think through my head. And I said, brain sometimes like a sieve. And then I'm looking through my library and we're like, okay, I cannot bring up this game because even though I didn't like it, some other people might like it, and I really haven't finished it. So maybe it's one of these games that, and I'm talking about Not Tonight too. Maybe it's one of these games that I have to push through a certain section to be able to continue and fully enjoy the game. But then I wandered upon in my Steam library Hordecore, and I said, WTF, I forgot about this game, and it was crap. I mean, we've played, all three of us have played side scrollers, specifically shooting side scrollers, so we know some of the issues when it comes to the shooting side scrollers, that if sometimes if you don't line yourself up correctly in the same row, if you imagine left to right is the same row as the thing that you're trying to hit, you're going to miss, because that's the nature of side scrollers and they have been that way since the 80s. So I'm not counting that as an issue because that's a known factor. It's the fact that the desync issues, the length of the game, it just was not fun, especially all the issues that we had through it. I think I'm showing 6 hours here of gameplay, but I'm pretty sure 2 hours of those, as you mentioned, we probably played about 4. I'm sure it was just trying to make sure that we were synced up and in the same location, because sometimes we couldn't see each other and had to start over again.
What shocks me is, as of today, it's actually, I mean, it's not massive number, but it's mostly positive.
It's possible that they may have done a fix on it. It is completely possible. But when we played it, it was in a bad state.
It was 4.6 hours on record is what I have in my Steam library for a game that is $12. Now, I'm not that much of a stickler about price for game time. Not that much, but at the same time, it's nice to have about a dollar an hour at the very least. Um, so that was a little thin on the content. I'll definitely give a lot of leeway if the story is good. It's a different thing, but that particular
it should be
game,
cheaper, or it should be an early access if they're planning to do more. It's not, in my opinion, it's just not a complete experience yet. And you have more tolerance for like a 4 or 5 hour game than I do. I mean,
I do.
Citizen Sleeper at 10 hours is probably on the shorter end. I mean, I play the hundreds of hour games, not necessarily on MMOs anymore, but like I'm playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey right now.
Oh no, fuck those games.
That's a long ass game. I like those type of games, although some can be much grindier than others, right? I'm not going into Assassin's Creed today. We're not doing that. But this game, for like 4 hours to finish it, and what it has there, I mean, like, it looks like it's promising. It looks like you're developing into something, and then it's not. So it does not deserve its price tag.
Look, I don't mind shorter games, specifically if it's like a story-based game or like a walking simulator, you could say, that you have a full-fledged story and it's almost like watching and going through a movie. I have no problems with that.
Great, I
Of
like those
course,
games.
exactly. So for me, those type of games, it's a little chunk of story, great. But this is an action game, supposed to be, you can play single player, of course, but one of the things is like, hey, let's get your buddies and, like shoot some zombies. And I realize we've talked about 3 zombie games this this podcast.
I am part of
But
the demographic here. I'm always going to talk about zombie games.
I get it.
The
But
Indie Zombie Cast, yes.
but with this game, it was like, okay, really a co-op game that can be pretty much finished in 4 hours? No, that's not worth it. No. And I
No.
understand there might be some replayability, but this game, how it played and the content, do you really want to replay it after finishing it? I would argue that not.
I have no desire
It's a
to replay it.
roguelike, and we got through it in one shot, and I had no desire to try it or other characters or anything ever again. That's not a good sign.
No.
It's not. You mean we were talking a little bit about Noida earlier. That's a game where it is a roguelike, and you're going to die all the time. But I've got I don't know, 150 hours or something in that. That's a lot for me, right? And there's always something new. There's always something interesting. And if you're making a roguelike game, you've got to cultivate that sort of sense of wonder that you get from, oh, what if I did things this way, or whatever it is. But that game had none of that really. The differences were minor in terms of what you could do, in terms of the advantages you have versus other things. There was not enough distinction in the different classes. Not to say that there wasn't distinction, there was, but it just didn't feel interesting enough. And that's the thing. There's a lot of games that are sort of hard to quantify in certain gameplay mechanics areas, or maybe just for me, that sort of lack as much of a fun aspect. Not to say that we didn't finish the game as it was in 4 hours, because we did. We still played through it, but yeah, not interested in playing it again.
No.
Really.
So I just wanted to bring that one up since I know that you guys mentioned for the mixed / bad. I thought, okay, let me see if there's this one. Yeah, this one is probably one we all wish we could forget.
That was a good sort of an impromptu pick there. Definitely worth mentioning. IndieCast it should be about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Really, not only the good and bad, the ugly, but the the mixed. I like the mixed idea of, I really love this about this game, but this just one aspect of it I couldn't deal with it, whatever it is. Because I think for anybody that ever happens to watch this in the future, you can discern, like, is that something that's really going to be a deal breaker for me if you trust my opinion, right, in the first place. But yeah.
Now, if it weren't for the fact that I've been playing Dead Cells recently, I would have given it a mixed review. Now, I do love Dead Cells, but it is a roguelike Metroidvania. Now, recently, because I've been playing it, they've added an assist mode to it to make it not so roguelike. So for people who do not like to just be die hard, everything has to be, once you die, you have to start over from the beginning. The assist mode has one of the options that you can just restart in your last checkpoint, which is a great thing. For me in these type of games, and I understand the people that like to have these type of challenges, but what does it hurt you and the type of challenge that you're going after to make it more accessible for people that don't like to have their asses beat down every other second? I just want to experience the story. I want to experience the gameplay of a Metroidvania-like. But the roguelike is really not the most interesting thing for me.
I'm much more likely to play Dead Cells if I didn't have my fill from watching you than I am to ever play a Dark Souls game, because screw the Dark Souls developers and their fan base who refuse to, or that basically gatekeep their game. They go on and on about how amazing the story and stuff is. Well, fuck you. I'm never going to see it because you refuse to make it any more accessible. I do not like the balancing. I have no interest in it. I don't care that there are people who basically can run through every game back to back, not getting hit once. Great. I'm glad that makes you feel good. What does it hurt to let me like be able to one shot an enemy or be able to see the story? You said it's good, but you don't want me to play it. Okay, well, screw you. And now that I've offended all of the Dark Souls fan base,
Look, it's
Seems like a good way to go out. I'm the same way in regards to. Well, here's the thing: you're a business geek, right, Tath? As a business geek, why would you not try to make your game as accessible to as wide a number of people as possible?
because you don't want to be Candy Crush, and that's fine. But there's a line between my hyperbole and exactly what you said. If you make yourself more accessible, you will make more money. More people will buy it. They want the game to be clearly more because supposedly, from everyone that said, Elden Ring is the most accessible Dark Souls game that's ever been made. Technically.
I've heard that.
But it still has all of the problems that has haunted all of the Dark Souls games. They're very janky. Climbing or ledges and stuff are a problem. AI is bad. They're not perfect games. Yay, they have difficulty. I played Tactics Ogre, which I called earlier in this episode the Dark Souls of like Final Fantasy Tactics games. I'll stand by that, even though I hate the phrase. You mentioned what game was the Dark Souls of walking simulators, right? Like,
right.
like, okay, yes, but I like the dark fantasy concept. It is an RPG titularly. I understand that in theory you can grind your way so that things are easier to survive somewhat. But because you won't do anything, I don't even care. You could insult me and call it a baby mode. That would still have given me a chance to actually play it.
Sure, pussy mode. Like, who cares what you call it?
If you want to insult me in that fashion, that at least gives me a chance where I might have played it. But because you won't do that, I basically say F you to you and all of your toxic community.
Yeah, you can't have my money because of the fact that there's certain games that I will try to go for a challenge and try to play through it and just scream my way through it and punch walls or whatever. That's fine. But there's sometimes that you just don't want to do that all the time. And okay, fine. You don't want to make it accessible to me? You can't have my money, plain and simple. Same with Chris Wilson and PoE. That's another different topic.
We'll get there.
I mean,
One of these days we'll get there.
Is definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't have much to contribute in that. Honestly, that might be a TMZ podcast more than anything because I don't have a whole lot to contribute to that. I played PoE for maybe 10 hours.
But we talked about this before. I want to juxtapose that versus Diablo 4 potentially. I'd like to compare those two once they're out.
I'm really not looking forward to Diablo 4. I'll still probably
I'm not super excited, but I'm cautiously optimistic about some of the stuff that's come out. It's more of, do we do it for the content is the question. If everything as it stands right now, it's looking cautiously optimistic enough that maybe it'd be a good and give us an episode to finally talk about this subject.
If we don't do it,
we don't do it.
Sure. And my buddy will definitely want to play with us. The guy that we played PoE with briefly, the Hearthstone
Lost
guy.
Ark.
Yes, I'm sorry, Lost Ark. Right.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
My expectations of Diablo 4 is, of course, a cash shop, which is going to basically smack me in the face and just make me go, here's a middle finger. That's all the money you're gonna get from me, a middle finger. And the expectation of maybe running through it once for the story and then putting it down. That's my expectation right now. That's how low my expectation of Diablo is after Diablo 3.
Yeah. I mean, we ranted about Activision Blizzard in general, so I don't think any of us have high expectations. I'm cautiously optimistic about gameplay. I'm heavily negative and expecting that while they won't have pay to win, it'll be monetized to hell and back in every other way possible. That's my expectation. So it might be fun to play through the campaign as a group. But I also expect that there's going to be a large section, if we do end up doing that and having the podcast about it in PoE, that we're going to have a very long section about, and this is why Activision sucks about monetization. And now we have gone super long.
We're over 2 hours. This is far and away our longest cast that we've done.
This is why I said like maybe we should pick like 3 games a piece. And I already realized after we were like in the 2, I'm like, yeah, this could be a long ass episode.
Look, like I mentioned earlier, I can talk about Oni for hours and hours on end. And I know I probably wasn't the longest one talking about the game, but damn it. This is a long one, and we had a good time, I hope.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. These are all games that we're passionate about. And when you're passionate about a game, you're going to talk about a lot of the details really that spoke to you. And so really this is inevitable for an indie cast. I imagine all the indie casts that we have, because this is going to be a series, right?
I mean, maybe we rebrand it What You Playing or something. It just depends on what we're talking about. But I mean, let's be fair. 99% of what we're talking about ain't going to be AAA. It's probably going to be AA and indie games. I mean, occasionally we'll talk about Cyberpunk or something, right? But realistically, most of the stuff we're going to talk about is probably going towards indie. So I don't know. We'll figure out how we brand it going forward. Not that our branding matters because we're not making any money.
No, we're just doing this as a hobby because we enjoy it. But one of the things I like to do in terms of music, in terms of games, is to shine a spotlight on the really obscure stuff, which is why I talked about Strange Horticulture. I'm sure nobody's heard of that game, right? Because those games need love too. It's on my channel. I like to do covers of extremely obscure games. Does it help my viewer count? No, they have very low views. Nobody cares because it's a Commodore 64 game from 1982. Who cares? But I loved it. So, right.
And that's all that matters, man. But I think that's a good place to call this one. Since we've definitely rambled, although even if we could ramble more, we will in the future. I know what I'd love to do for the next podcast. We'll see if it turns out to be the next podcast or if we do one of our mashups. We've got a lot of topics on the plate that we've already got sitting around. So I guess until next time, here's Tath, Zay, and Jaedaen signing off. And since I'm doing the outro, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
See you later, guys.
Keep on rambling, everybody. Have a good one.